So this is lesson number 62, Algebra 1, square roots, higher order roots, and evaluating using plus or minus signs. Okay, first sentence they say in this lesson is every positive number has one positive and one negative square root. Meaning if I have the square root of 16, that equals 4. It says every positive number, there's your positive number, has one positive root and one negative root. Meaning that if I take 4 times 4, that will give me the number in here. So the root of 16, the two numbers multiplied together to give me 16, is going to be 4. 4 times 4. Okay? It also has a negative root. Negative 4 times negative 4. Two negatives give me what? A positive. Negative 4 times negative 4 is positive 16. So the square root of 16 is both positive 4 and negative 4. Not or, and. And the way you write this is a plus, a minus sign under it, and a 4. So you don't have to write it twice. And that just means plus or minus 4. Okay? Plus or minus 4. But protocol or convention or the way things work is when I want to know the square root of a number, you usually give what is called the principal root. You usually give the positive square root of that. So you would just tell me 5. You wouldn't tell me 5 or negative 5 or plus or minus 5. You just tell me 5. Okay, so we get down to that first example, and it tells you to use your calculator and find out what the square root of 18 is using a calculator. And you end up getting, when you do that, 4.24264. Now, that is an estimate because that number goes on and on and on and on and on because it's irrational. But they said use a calculator to determine to 5 decimal places. Okay, so we went to 5 decimal places and we just wrote that down. That is not the exact answer. In fact, very rarely will I have you give me the answer to a radical in decimal form. Usually what I'll do is have you give me the radical in a simplified or a reduced radical form, so you'll still have a square root in the answer. But anyway, if it says, like example 62.2, use a calculator to determine the two square roots of 10 to 6 decimal places. Alright, so we've got 2 square roots of 10. We've got a positive number and a negative number. So you take your calculator, you find the square root of 10, and it'll give you 3.16227766. And what did it say? It wanted you to do it to 6 decimal places. Let's see what I've got. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm stopping at 7, but since this number is 5 or larger, then this 7 here changes to an 8 and these go away. Change to an 8 and these go away. So now I have my plus or minus there. Alright, so one of the things they're asking you to do in example 62.3, which I usually make my students memorize. It's pretty important. In fact, I usually have memorized 1 to 20, the squares. So if I say, what's 6 squared? You'd say 36. If I said, what's 13 squared? You'd say 169. If I'd say 14 squared, you'd say 196. 19 squared, you'd give me 361. You'd just be able to write them down that fast. And so that example there in the middle of the page is pretty important for you to actually get really, really familiar with. Alright, so I'm not going to worry about example 62.4, but we're going to jump up into higher order roots, which is section 62b. Okay, so right now you're used to doing things like the square root of 36 and you get 6. And when you're dealing with square roots, let's make that big, we have a couple different things that you need to remember. This number underneath the radical sign is called the radicand. And there's always a number right here, and it's called the index. Okay? And when there's no index there, it's an assumed 2. So just like this one here, there isn't an index there, so you assume it's 2, so square root of 36. What two numbers multiplied by themselves will give me 36? 6. 6 times 6. Or I should say, which one number multiplied by itself will give me 36. So I multiplied it twice. So what do you think a cubed root means? That means what number multiplied by itself 3 times is going to give me 27. 3 times 3 is 9, 9 times 3 is 27. So the cubed root of 27 is 3. Cubed root of 8 says what number multiplied by itself 3 times is going to give me 8. Alright, cubed root of 125. What number multiplied by itself 3 times is going to give me 125. So the answer is 5. The answer to the cubed root of 8 is 2. The answer to the cubed root of 27 is 3. Okay? Let's do one a little tricky here. What if I want to know the square root of negative 9? What two numbers, or what number multiplied by itself is 9? 3. Can I multiply any other number by itself and get 9? No, 3 is the only one. Then how can I get a negative 9? If I multiply negative 3 times negative 3, I get a positive 9. If I multiply a negative 3 times a positive 3, well, those aren't the same numbers, so they can't do that. If I multiply a positive 3 times a positive 3, I get positive 9. So there is no way I can multiply two numbers together that are the same sign and get a negative answer. Because a negative times a negative is a positive, and a positive times a positive is a positive. So I can never find the answer to that until Algebra 2. Alright, another thing I can do is, what if I have a cubed root of negative 27? Now that's different. If this number is odd, I can take that root of a negative number. But because it was a 2 up here, in this one it had an index of 2, I can't. So if the index is a positive or an even number, I can't take the root of a negative. But if it's an odd number, I can. Look what happens. Negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9, times negative 3 is negative 27. So it works. So the cubed root of a negative number will be a negative number. Whatever number I can multiply by that 3 times, put a negative in front of it, and that's my answer. Okay? Fourth root of a number, exact same thing as a cubed root, only we're going to put a 4 up here, and we'll put a 16. What number times itself 4 times gives me 16? So the answer to that is 2. Okay? Alright, well, let's look at some examples here and see how you do with this. Okay, so we've got negative 2 squared plus negative 3 squared plus or minus square root of 4. Alright, we're supposed to evaluate. If you remember, if I have a number and a negative in front of it, but I don't have parentheses like I do here, we square the number, then we put the negative on it. Okay, now this one is different because the negative is inside the parentheses with the 3. That means it's part of it. Negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. So this one's negative because there's no parentheses. This one turns positive because there are. Plus or minus the square root of 4. What's the square root of 4? 2. So my answer is negative 4 plus 9 plus 2, or negative 4 plus 9 minus 2. So this plus or minus means I'm going to get two answers. I'm going to add 2 and I'm going to subtract 2. So this gives me 7, and this one gives me 3. So I actually get two different answers for this problem. Okay, I get a 7 or a 3 for this. Alright, let's look at one more problem. I'm going to look at example 62.2. I'm going to go back to the top of page 254. It says use a calculator to determine the two square roots of 10. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's go to 62.4. Without using a calculator, determine between what two consecutive integers the square root of 10 lies. That means, what is the square root of 10 close to? Well, let's see. Is the square root of 10 a number bigger than 3? What's the square root of 9? 3. So the square root of 10 is going to have to be bigger than 3. So it's going to be 3 point something something something. Okay? What's the number after square root of, or after the square root of 10? Square root of 11. But they're saying doing this without a calculator, so we don't even need to do that. All you need to do is they give you the square root of 10, take the number below it that you can take the square root of, and you know that the square root of 10 is going to be just a little bit bigger than the square root of 9. So there's going to be some number here, a bunch of numbers here, decimals here, and what's the next number above 3 point yada yada yada? Well, it'll be 4. So you know the square root of 10 lies somewhere between 3 and 4. Okay, so let's look at the practice one. It says, without a calculator, determining between what two consecutive integers the square root of 27 lies. Okay, so what is a number smaller than 27 that we know the square root of? 25. Square root of 25 is 5. Okay? And therefore I know that the square root of 27 is going to be a little bit bigger than 5. I don't know how much bigger, but I know it's not 6 because the square root of 36 is 6. So I know that this answer here is somewhere between the number 5 and the number 6. And that's what they're looking for there. That's what they're trying to get you to find. Okay, let's look at the practice problem C and D there real quick before I run out of time. Alright, it says the square root of 81, this is D, minus the square root of 144. What you have to do to solve this is find the square root of 81, the square root of 144, 9 minus 12 is negative 3, and that's it. So you're going to have to find the square root of each of these, and then it says take the difference. Okay, so that's it for lesson 62 in Algebra 1.